Hey everybody, I'm back. Thanks again. And still trying format changes and whatnot, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't. Anyway, I'm here to talk about my top 25 records. Now, this was supposed to be a top 10 list, but it kept growing, and as lists do. And as I was putting it together, as I was pulling the records off of my shelves to show you, because of course I have to own all to 25 for them to be my top 25. Anyway, regardless, as I was pulling them off, I was realizing this is more of a list of the most influential records in my life that have made me the odd eccentric person that I am today. So, yeah, if you want to watch me lose count, because I'm sure that I will, then let's go. Let's get on this. Let's talk about my top 25. Coming in at number 25, boom, Dave Brubeck Quartet, Timeout, Take 5. This is some quality jazz. I'm getting eaten by the album. Quality jazz, ladies and gentlemen. I'm still learning how to do this, obviously. But yeah, this is the kind of stuff that I was raised on, and this is my speaker test album. Anytime I get a new pair of speakers, first thing I play every time. Why? Because it's like, because the Take 5, the most famous track on this album, although Blue Rondo a la Turk, quite excellent. Anyway, but Take 5 starts off with the low drum sound, and then piano kicks in, and then we're getting some saxophone, and it just goes lows, mids, highs, and they all separate, and the recording is so like wide open, like it's a great reference recording, that you can hear everything. And so if you want to be able to tell if your speakers are any good, how accurately do they recreate, this is my usual test. Number 24, I haven't lost count yet, is one of my favorite all-time female vocalists. She is number 2 on my list of all-time favorite female vocalists. And even saying that she's number 2 makes me feel bad because she is so massively awesome. I'm talking about the one, the only Pata, Aretha Franklin. Yeah, Aretha Now. This is an excellent album. This is the one with, it's got Think. By the way, the version of Think from the Blues Brothers soundtrack, I love both versions, but like that one, it's dipped in some special sauce. You see everyone who's playing on that one. Anyway, I mean, granted, everyone who's playing on this one is, now that we've learned more about the backing bands and whatnot over the years. Anyway, Think, I Say a Little Prayer for You, Nighttime is the Right Time, You Send Me, Take What I Want, Hello Sunshine, I Can't See Myself Leaving You. Like, did I just literally read off every other track? Practically. Like, they're all good, but like, so many of the songs on this album are like some of the all-timers of Aretha Franklin's entire catalog, and just that early Atlantic goodness. So good. That is number 24. Number 23, Pacha. Now, when I started collecting records in earnest, the shop where I got most of my collection, even to this day, it has increased in size, but still the vast majority of the records I own came from one shop and one shop only. And I'm talking about East Side Records, Tempe, Arizona. If you remember the old record collecting scene from the, late 90s, early 2000s, that was the spot to be. And those guys in there listen to some crazy, like super rare cut, like dance hall, reggae, early ska stuff, like two-tone vibes and whatnot. Like they listen to a lot of that kind of stuff if you came in during the day. You come in during the nights and weekends, those guys were in their own garage band, the Tri-City Thundercats, and they ran a record label, I Don't Feel a Thing Records, and I have a bunch of those 45s. Anyway, that's where I cut my teeth. And like, this is a callback to cool things that the guys from East Side Records turned me on to early on. And if you're not much of a reggae person, or if you're one of those reggae people who has only ever heard Bob Marley, which is an unfortunate large amount of people, check this one out. The title track is like, mwah. It was also the title track if you were the kind of weird music that I was in college. You will recognize the sample as it was sampled in a soul coughing song. You'll know which one. It's a good one too. Anyway, oh, and there's a cover of Country Roads on this album that is like fantastic. I don't think I need to ever hear the original Country Roads ever again. Thanks, Gen Z. Like, here's my gripe with Gen Z. If you are Gen Z, my apologies. Like, I have a ton of respect for your generation for a lot of things. I'm a teacher. I teach y'all. I'm around y'all every day. There are so many things that I respect you for. One of the things that I hate about your generation is that you'll latch on to one song and one song only from an artist's catalog, and then you will sap all of the goodwill that we as a society have for that song by playing it over and over and over. You did it to Africa by Toto. You did it to Country Roads when Fallout 76 came out. And by the way, that wasn't even a good game. Like, I'm sorry. It wasn't. It was not a good game. You did it to Bohemian Rhapsody. I never thought that I would ever get tired of Bohemian Rhapsody, but I legitimately need to give it a break. Um, for like a decade or better, I need to not hear that song because y'all went and overplayed it, and it drives me crazy. And here's the funny thing is that I'm like 100% through with John Denver's Country Roads because I've heard it too many times. But Toots and the Maytals, I could still go another round. Is good. Anyway, next up, this one taps into my punkish and my power popish tendencies. Ho ho, whoop, bop, boop, ah. The Jam, All Mod Cons. Oh, what an album this one is. Now, I have most of the early Jam records. There's only one or two that I'm missing. I have almost all of the early albums by the Jam on vinyl, early pressings, not reissues. Those one of the great things about East Side Records. They sold these to me for a song because nobody else was really collecting it at the time. And because it wasn't punk enough for the punk crowd, and it wasn't, I don't know, whatever else for the whatever else crowd. And so I was the one guy who was like, you got records by the Jam? And so I just bought them up. Anyway, this one, All Mod Cons, the title track, so good. David Watts, English Road, A Bomb in Wardour Street, Down in the Tube Station at Midnight, like the classic Jam tracks, my man. Anyway, good stuff. Love this album. That one was number 23. Was it 25, 24, 23, 22? Sorry. I knew I would lose track already. that was 22. This is 21. Wow. Gotta figure out which way to tilt it. Radioactivity, Kraftwerk. Oh, the pioneers of electronic music. And this one is so like post-apocalyptically sparse and yet also experimentally gorgeous and wonderful. Like it's just I think it's a beautiful album. I find a great deal of beauty and tranquility in this album in that like we have kind of avoided the society that this was, a portent of. And, like we've done slightly better for ourselves than they were worried about on this album. I mean, this classic nuclear era, Cold War era type stuff. And it really shows. I mean, the title track, obviously. But yeah, it's such a beautiful album. I really, really love it. Of all the Kraftwerks, and I love Kraftwerk. My little brother hates Kraftwerk. I had a mixtape that he got a hold of. When I went away to college, I didn't take a lot of my cassette tapes with me, and I had it was mostly like synth pop and stuff that I put Kraftwerk's Boing Boom Chuck, which is not from this album. It's from uh, a different one. Anyway, but yeah, he hated it so much, and it just hated that song. But I love it anyway, and I love how this whole thing looks like an old timey radio. Like, bah, what a gorgeous, gorgeous thing that is. Anyway, love me some Kraftwerk. Anyway, so that was 21. Now number 20. Boom. I mean, I know. This is like saying, I like breathing air. Like it's such an obvious choice, but it's so good though. It's so good. And Meatloaf just died. And also, Jim Steinman died not that long ago, which was also sad. Like, Jim Steinman wrote all of the, big operatic songs that Meatloaf put his voice on. And 99.9% of the time, if Jim Steinman and Meatloaf are working together on it, it will be fantastic. There's very, very few times when it wasn't absolutely fantastic. Only one that I'm thinking of, and it makes me sad. But like this one, what a classic. I mean, for real. Look, Bat Out of Hell, you took the words right out of my mouth. Heaven Can Wait, all revved up with, I'm just reading the track list. I'm not selecting. All revved up with No Place to Go. 2 out of 3 Ain't Bad. Paradise by the Dashboard Light, for crying out loud. Like, that's just the track listing. Also mixed by Todd Rundgren. Todd Rundgren got involved in this, and what a great musician he was and is, and how much great stuff did he put out. And yeah, total classic. And the back of the album, man, that I just it takes me back to a time and a place in which I was hearing Meatloaf's incredible voice for the first time, and I was blown away. You know what I would love? Like, one of my things that, people always say holy grails and whatnot. I didn't even know if it came out on vinyl, but the Meatloaf had a big resurgence in the 90s, which is when I found out about him, because he released Bat Out of Hell 2, Back Into Hell, which was him getting back with Jim Steinman for the first time in a decade, I think, at that point. And the magic was still there. And that album went super mega ultra through the freaking roof, and we all knew that he would do anything for love, but he wouldn't do that. Uh, and how is it that people don't know what the that is that he would do anything for, but not that? Because if you listen to it, Bonnie Tyler, I'm pretty sure that's Bonnie Tyler, because she also worked with Jim Steinman. Of course she did. Big operatic songs, huge vocals, over the top production. Of course it's Jim Steinman. Anyway, regardless. But when she says, like, it'll all turn to dust, it'll all fall down, and sooner or later you'll be screwing around, he's like, I won't do that. I will not do that. She's like, oh, you're just going to cheat on me and leave me, basically. And he's like, never, never will I do that. That's the thing he won't do for love. I don't know how people missed it, but I like on MTV back in the day, people used to be like, no, what won't Meatloaf do for love? And I'm like, he says it in the song. Anyway, regardless, I love me some Meatloaf. Next up, oh, I'm gonna have to take this one out the sleeve because I have to show you a little something extra. This is Roxy Music. Oh yeah, talking about some Roxy music right here. For Your Pleasure is the album, and this was actually the first Roxy Music album I ever purchased. I saw the cover and I was like, what is this? And they were like, it's glam. And I was like, what is that? And they're like, do you like Queen? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, kind of like that. And I was like, okay, I will buy this, please. And I paid not very much money for it. And it has inside here, in the inner of the gatefold, it has the greatest rock and roll pictures ever taken, ever. And the one of Brian Eno is gonna, I don't know, is gonna knock your dick in the dirt. Like, you are not prepared for how, okay, first of all, first of all, I mean, hey now. I mean, hello. And I mean, what? Brian Eno. My God. Why are you the very most? Like, I love that picture so much. So much. And I had not seen that when I first bought this album, but I did what you do back in the day. I purchased it. I went home, slapped it on my turntable, which at the time was a Pioneer PL115D, and which I still have, and it's a total fucking workhorse. Anyway, but yeah, put on this Mamma Jamma, and I was like, oh, I dig this. And then I open up the sleeve, and I was like, oh, like, I understand glam now. Yeah, I get it. I have been taught in the ways. Okay, this next one is getting kind of rare and collectible because, you know, they weren't issuing as many records back then, because it was a brand new record for 1990. I'm talking about They Might Be Giants' brand new album, Flood. Flood. That's the way the spine goes on the gatefold, but that's the orientation of the picture. They Might Be Giants. They Might Be Giants are just so, I don't know, they're so great. Like, either you know about them and you're like, God damn it, they're good. Or you don't really know about them and you're like, I guess I've heard of them maybe. Uh, because there's nothing like They Might Be Giants. They're nothing. I mean, what are you going to say? Violent Femmes? What are you going to say? Aquabats? Like, what are you going to say? Like, Devo? I mean, like, for bands who were that experimental and that like independently motivated and awesome back in the day, who are still around and are still doing it at a high level, like, They Might Be Giants. I mean, they might be frying up a stock of wheat, I don't know. I don't know what they're doing right this very moment, but what I will tell you is that this one has stood the test of time, and I'm very happy to have it in my collection, especially because it's getting harder to find now. But I love that album. Every single song on here. You want me to read the track list? Because it's literally every song, literally every one. Now, I've lost count. I will go back in post and I will put a number, boo, right there. There will be information next to my giant coconut head. Anyway, so the next one. When I already mentioned before, when I heard this woman sing for the first time, I almost started crying in the store because it was so beautiful. And I'm talking about my all-time number one most favorite female vocalist, the greatest one ever. She's the best. There is no contest. I don't give the slightest of fucks who you were about to say. Because if you were not about to say Ella Fitzgerald, then you are wrong. I'm sorry. Thank you for playing. It's Ella Fitzgerald. She's the best. She's the absolute best female vocalist there has ever been or will ever be in the entire world. Ever, ever. End of sentence. That's it. She's just that good. And this one, okay, so the spine runs this way, but that puts the album upside down. But the back of the album is right side up when the spine is right side up. But the front, who designed that? And why? Anyway, nice stereophonic copy. But yeah, this one, she went and performed in Berlin. Norman Granz, the owner, proprietor, badass who ran Verve Records, was like, hey, Ella Fitzgerald, the world needs to hear your voice. And so he was putting her on a plane here, there, and everywhere. And in Berlin, this is post-war Germany, and they were so eager to like embrace things that were new and move on and build something better and like escape the horrors of the past. That like, they absolutely lost their minds for what Ella Fitzgerald was doing. And as a result, what Ella Fitzgerald was doing was like insane. She was scat singing so fast and so well. And they have put her Mac the Knife, which is, hopefully the record doesn't fall out. Mac the Knife, the title track on this album. Yeah, she didn't actually know the words. It was a brand new song at the time, and she legitimately didn't know the words, but the crowd requested it. And so she just started singing it, and the band starts playing along. And then she forgets the words, and then she just starts to improvise vocally very quickly and very precisely. They've put that, there's a type of algorithmic analysis for classical music to tell how like accurate it is to music theory, like how well it adheres to the rules of music theory. And they put Ella Fitzgerald's improvisation in Mac the Knife. They put it through that analysis, and it was like it scored on a level comparable to fucking Mozart. Like it was impeccable. The woman was a much better musician, a much better like genius of music than she ever gets credit for, and she has the most beautiful female voice I've ever heard. So there's that, I guess. Anyway, next up, when I was in high school, my friend Dan was like, "Hey, I I've got to introduce you to this guy because genre means nothing to him." And I was like, "Who does genre mean nothing to?" And he's like, "It's a bit older. It's from like the 70s." And at that time, like people were hating on the 70s. They were like, "Ew, 70s colors and blue." And then very shortly thereafter, like after Dazed and Confused came out, everybody was like, "Oh, the 70s were pretty cool." you know? Anyway, regardless. But yeah, this was during the time in the 90s when everybody was like, ugh, 70s, disco and all that crap. Anyway, so yeah, my friend Dan is like this guy to whom genre means nothing, and he's the most incredible songwriter and lyricist I've ever heard. And I was like, well, you've taught me a ton about music thus far. I'll take your recommendation. Boom. Elvis Costello, My Aim is True. It most certainly is. Um, what a fantastic album. Holy cow. You want to talk about songwriting, you want to talk about lyricism. Man, so good. So good. Holds up perfectly to this day. It is like one of the least decade dependent albums you will ever hear. You know what I'm saying? Like, because there are albums that you'll hear and you'll be like, hey, it's a real 80s album. Ooh, yeah, that's real, heavy, like late 60s production on that. Like, oh, there's some 50s business going on there. Yeah, there are eras of recording that you can hear and you can tell like these are the limitations of the recording equipment they had, or like these were the trends of the time in recording that have fallen by the waysides, since. Yeah, this one is like, and I love like, wait, who produced this one? I forget. But Stiff Records, back in the day. And yeah, so many good things on Stiff Records. Anyway, but yeah, the whole Rockpile gang, like Nick Lowe, Dave Edmunds, they were all producing each other's stuff. And and then Elvis Costello was writing songs for them and then producing their stuff. And it was this whole cool British indie, 1970s like own genre. Like it came out coinciding with punk, and so it had a punkish attitude, but it wasn't like really what you would think of as punk now. But very, very cool. And Dan was right. Genre means nothing to Elvis Costello. Like he will cross any of those boundaries whenever, wherever. Okay, this one I am very happy to have in my collection, and I desperately need to find a way to protect it better. So if anybody knows of like things you can get to protect box sets, because I did have a rule that it wouldn't be any greatest hits compilations, but some albums are very large. Like they have multiple LPs inside. This one, George Harrison, All Things Must Pass. Hey, George Harrison is the best Beatle. Did you know that? Were you aware that George Harrison is the best Beatle? He's the best one. Nobody is better than he is. Beatle wise, post Beatles career, George Harrison, a number one. Like, no contest. Not even close. You want to come at me with Paul McCartney? Feh. Like, not even close. Not even close. You want to come at me with John Lennon? Like, look, I know that it's sad that he died. I am sad that he died. I'm not saying, like, oh, the world doesn't need more John Lennon. Like, sure, I would take more John Lennon if that were a thing that could happen in the world. But, like, if you gave me a choice, would you rather the world give you more Paul McCartney, more John Lennon, or more George Harrison? Sorry, Ringo. Like, I love you on so many things, but like, your solo output is often baffling. So, sorry, you do not make my list. All due respect to you, everybody who does the whole like, oh, did you know that John said that Ringo's not even the best drummer in the Beatles? Well, that's bullshit. Like, it is. I took a class in college on the Beatles. Thank you very much, because I went to Arizona State and you could take a class on the Beatles. My wife also took that class. Anyway, and you learn things about like that George Harrison is the best one, number one. I mean, granted, in that class, there would be an actual division of people where you'd be like, who's your favorite Beatle? And like, there are all the people who weren't really paying attention who'd be like, it's John, like, and then the people who think they're being contrarian would be like, well, Paul was really, but the people who actually listened were like, guys, I'm sorry. This is where the truth is. Anyway, regardless, yeah. George Harrison, All Things Must Pass. Original set with the original. I really need to swap these out, and I need to find a better way to store this. But they are the original colored paper sleeves with the lyrics on them. I need to preserve this better. There are not very many things in my collection that I can say that about. Most of the time, I think about it like if a record comes home with me, it's safe. Like, it's going to be okay. Anyway, next up. This is one of those bands that I can say that I was on early. Boom, the Black Keys, Thick Freakness. Now, I heard the Black Keys before Thick Freakness. I do have an original pressing, big come up on white vinyl. Those are getting a little pricier these days. But I also saw the Black Keys at the Mason Jar in Phoenix. And it was me and like 30 record store employees, most of whom I knew. And we were just the show for the audience for the Black Keys show. And we're all just like, God, this is a cliche what's happening right now. It's just who's on to the hip new band before everybody else. Well, it's us. Here we are. Like, the guys who work at the record store and the guys who hang out too much in the record store. Like, that's who's at the show. Anyway, regardless, but I love this band so much. And Thick Freakness, the title track of this album, is such beautiful distortion, and it's such like chunky, thick, gooey blues. Like, the picture on the front is the perfect, like, dig your fingers in that pomade because you gonna need it. This is some thick, chunky business. So yeah, it's so good. I love the Black Keys, and I love this album very, very much. Anyway, the next three albums in a row come from when I was in high school, and all of my friends listened to synth pop because I was, a young Mormon boy in a small Mormon town, and Mormons are always behind the times on everything. Like, trust me, they are. They're always behind the times. Anyway, but like, sometimes being behind the times is a good thing because there was a sweet spot of synth pop uh in the early 90s where like everything had gone grunge and had gone like Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Smashing Pumpkins and like alternative and blah, and all that stuff is great. I love all of that stuff. I totally do. Like, I pulled out my Smashing Pumpkins The Airplane Flies High box set. It is meow. I'm pointing to it because it's right next to me in this room. I would turn the camera, but the room's kind of messy. I don't want you to see it. Anyway, but like, yeah, it is a whole thing. But also at the same time, I mean, the late 90s, there was this whole boom in electronica. You get your like Massive Attacks and your Chemical Brothers and your Trickies and your Portisheads and your like just so many cool things that was happening back then. Propeller Heads, big fan of Propeller Heads. Anyway, that was late 90s. Early 90s, synth pop was still killing it hard. And there are three albums by three seminal synth pop bands that all came out about the same time, and every single one of them is an absolute gem, top to bottom, no bad songs, incredible. Get these, own these, have these, because they've all been reissued, and the reissues are really good, and they're easier to get. Well, one of them is harder to get, but I'm talking about Depeche Mode's Violator. Oh, what a winner. Oh my God. Like, good stuff to like uh unleash the darkness within. There's a certain like vibe in that album that's like, it's a touch of evil in that one, and I love it. Erasure, I say. This one I had to import, so it was harder to get a hold of and a little more expensive, but I had to have it on vinyl. I just did because I had these on cassette originally. That's how I originally listened to them in the early 1990s. And then I owned them on CD. And now that I'm also a vinyl collector, like, this one never came up to collect on vinyl. The Depeche Mode I've had for a while because it was reissued multiple times, but that's an earlier reissue. Anyway, this next one is the wrong color on vinyl. Boom. Pet Shop Boys, very. Yeah, the CD, which is what I consider to be the best way to experience this particular album. Hey, I love vinyl, but like the CD though, because that CD case is like an orange Lego. If you've never seen it, it is a one of a kind, unique CD case. Which, yes, there were like small issue indie, like, crazy things that were happening on CDs, especially was again late 90s electronica, where they were coming up with, crazy, weird origami CD cases and whatnot. But this one, big old orange Lego brick, so super cool. Which is why when this came, I was like, why is it yellow? I thought it would be, but it is a 180 gram remaster, so I'm perfectly fine with that. But Pet Shop Boys, very top to bottom, one of the greatest albums, one of my all time faves. The next one, oh man. I was looking at this and I was like, oh, I did not have my sticker and goo removal skills when I first bought this album. And I have not hit it yet, even though I have listened to this like, and fairly recently as well. But boom, Morrissey, Viva Hate. Yeah, I love Morrissey. I love the Smiths. I wish that I had bought more Smiths on vinyl. There was a really nice copy of Meat is Murder. And I didn't buy it because uh, I went to the record store before lunch, but I didn't get paid until after lunch. Or I didn't get to deposit my check until after lunch because the bank was like too far away for me to be able to deposit it on my lunch break. Anyway, and so like I didn't tell him to hold it for me because there were a couple other records I was looking at, and it's one of those ones that I still regret to this day where I'm like, "Ooh, I could have had a really nice copy of Meat is Murder." But anyway, Viva Hate. Oh, what a great album. Every Day is Like Sunday. That is my absolute favorite Morrissey song out of all the Morrissey songs. Um, anyway, so this next one is like, my dad listened to particular types of jazz. He liked a lot of, guitar based jazz and stuff. And so I heard some, good guitar jazz early in my life, which is fine. Like, guitar jazz is fine. It's not my favorite variety of instrumental jazz, but there is some really good guitar jazz in the world, obviously. But like the yeah, my older brother is the one who introduced me to Dave Brubeck. And yeah, so those were my jazz influences. And the one guy that my dad introduced me to that I didn't introduce myself to, because Ella Fitzgerald I found for myself. My dad introduced me to Louis Armstrong. Like that's the only uh non-instrumental jazz musician that my dad ever introduced me to, just because that's what he was listening to at the time. It wasn't like, you know, he was having lengthy conversations with me about jazz and just didn't sit me down on his knee and be like, well, sonny boy, this is what jazz is all about. Anyway, regardless. But there's so much jazz in the world and there's so many different types. Uh, and some of them may appeal to you and some of them may not appeal to you in the slightest. And so like, yeah, that's just the way it goes. And so when I found my own way in jazz, one of the guys that I found for myself that I was very proud that I found him and that I introduced myself to him and that I like learned everything I could about him because he's so fascinating and so talented. A jazz musician that I introduced both my father and brother to. Boom, Oscar Peterson. Now I have multiple Oscar Peterson albums, but there's something to me about like taking Broadway show tunes and interpreting them in jazz. I just cannot get enough. And because the West Side Story soundtrack itself was so steeped in jazz, and all that Bob Fosse choreography goodness, I just like this album hits a special sweet spot for me. And there are some gorgeous adaptations of some of those West Side Story songs. The Tonight and Somewhere, both of those songs, not to mention Maria, which is also really good. There are other, jazz greats who have West Side Story cover albums. Yeah, there are a lot of them, but because it was such a popular soundtrack at the time. But Oscar Peterson was such a fluidly, effortlessly great jazz pianist. There's a video on YouTube, I'll try and remember to link to it, where Oscar Peterson is on this late night talk show and he's showing how other jazz pianists play. And he's just effortlessly switching between these very diverse jazz piano styles. And then he also slips into his own style. And you realize, like, oh, he could have chosen anything as his style. Like, because he's so well rounded and well versed in everything. Oscar Peterson, if you don't know him, is an incredible pianist. Anyway, next up, this is one of the first albums that taught me how to rock, which is funny because it's not that rocky of a rock album. But I'm not kidding when I say that most of my early, like, how when you start listening to what your friends listen to, all of a sudden you're like, nah, dad's music sucks. And like, nah, my older brother's music, bah, and you sort of latch on to whatever your friends are listening to. Yeah. Anyway, I listened to almost nothing but synth pop in the early 90s, with only a few exceptions. Um, one of which was Nirvana's Nevermind, which crossed all cultural boundaries, didn't matter what you were doing at the time. Another was Soul Asylum's, the one with Runaway Train, Grave Dancers Union, that one. And then the other one, Pacha, REM's Out of Time. I'm a big REM guy. I have so many REM albums on vinyl, and on CD and on cassette and like on every format that I can own it on, I own it, because I love it so. And this one, because so many people were like, no, it would be a perfect album if only not for Shiny Happy People. Guys, like, just get over yourselves, like, please. It's still incredible. And yes, I do prefer this to Automatic for the People. And I know that that's blasphemous, but whatever, it's my list. Anyway, REM, Out of Time. Next up, oh, this is when I learned how to metal. when I learned how to metal properly. Uh, and I learned who the greatest heavy metal singer of all time is. There is a correct answer to that, and it is not Ozzy. Thank you very much. But it is someone who did provide lead vocals for Sabbath. I'm talking about Ronnie James Dio, ladies and gentlemen. Dio has rocked for a long, long time, and unfortunately, he has passed away. But like, the goods still remain. Holy Diver. This is a like 30th anniversary, I think 30th anniversary reissue, heavy gram vinyl, I think 180 gram, and on multiple, because I do have an original pressing of this and it's just on a single record. This is on two. So, they mastered it well, I hope. I actually haven't listened to this version yet. I only recently got this. And so it needs to be heard soon. I need to play it. But yeah, anyway, this next one, I literally played the Ever Lovin' Everything out of this album. This one, and there's another one that the only reason it's not on the list is because it's a greatest hits. And that's because it's Johnny Horton's greatest hits. I was raised on Johnny Horton's greatest hits, ladies and gentlemen. Like, look, here's the thing. My great grandfathers on both sides of my family were like legit real ass American cowboys, like for real. And like I have enough hicks on my mother's side of the family that they used to have a family rodeo and it was almost as big as the county rodeo. So, like, yeah, anyway, I was raised on some things like that. And so Johnny Horton was huge. Marty Robbins was like massive. It's funny because when I was a kid, like, yeah, sure, like Waylon Jennings was there and Johnny Cash was there, and we heard these things. But for some reason, my best friend and I, that we used to just sit next to the record player and play the ever loving hell out of these records. We would just play Marty Robbins' Gunfighter Ballads and Johnny Horton's greatest hits. I should have put Marty Robbins in here. Why the hell didn't I put Marty Robbins in here? Anyway, this video is going to be entirely too long. But anyway, this next album is not a country album, not in the least. This is one of the most influential albums on me as a human, for so many reasons. This is how I learned to enjoy classical music as a child, which that is something that has paid dividends in my life. Because here's the thing, just fun record collecting fact, okay? People who play country music take shit care of their records. They're like kicking them around trucks and stuff. So they're all beat to hell every time. Like, it's just hard to find some of those like really great early country albums in decent shape, because country music fans, more often than not, do not take good care of their records. But you know who takes excellent care of their records that you can find at thrift stores, and just like, how most of the time when people are like, I know where there's records, I heard you collect records, and it's like some basement with like Lawrence Welks and stuff in it. You know what there's also usually a lot of in these types of places? classical. And that classical is so more often than not in just like mwah shape. Like, I should have more of it in my collection than I do, but also limited space. So, what are you going to do? Anyway, this record introduced me to classical, but also introduced me to ideas about, like, hey, be what you want to be, do what you want to do. We're talking about Wendy Carlos switched on Bach 2. Not SOB1, SOB2. That's where it's at. Like, I will swear by that to my grave. I will swear that this is the superior switched on Bach record. I don't give a fuck what anyone else has to say, but when it comes to playing Bach in the original Baroque tunings on an analog synthesizer, the better album is Switched on Bach 2. Also, note that this does have the dead name of Wendy Carlos. It has been corrected in reissues and whatnot, but yeah, that's an original pressing, so gotta have the old ones. That's because very often the remaster, if it's coming from digital and whatnot, it's not gonna have the same, like, when it comes to vinyl. If you're too much about, like, I need it to be reproduced 100%, well, then get the CD or get the FLAC files or whatever. But if it's about, like, reproducing an experience of what it's like to feel involved in the process of reproducing sounds from your past that you love, or even sounds from your right now that you love, vinyl, sure, absolutely. Let's not be ridiculous about it. Anyway, SOB2. Anyway, moving up the list, we're getting into favorite artist territory. And this is one of my all-time favorite artists. Boom. Queen, Day at the Races. Now, I know that I'm supposed to choose A Night at the Opera. Yeah, the white version of this. That preceded it by a year, I think. They put these out pretty quickly, surprisingly quickly, given how, like, incredible they are. And a lot of people want to crap on A Day at the Races for not being as good as A Night at the Opera, but hold up, tie your mother down. Like, come on, to start with. You Take My Breath Away, The Millionaire Waltz, You and I, Somebody to Love, White Man. That was, like, it's a legitimately fun song. I'm sorry. Good Old Fashioned Lover Boy, and Teo Toriate, Let Us Cling Together, is gorgeous. Anyways, so, like, A Day at the Races, it's really good, and people crap on it. And also, I need a break from Bohemian Rhapsody, so A Day at the Races. Okay, next up, the best album by just one of the very best ever. A man who, no matter what time it is, and no matter what year it is, and no matter what's happening in the world, he was always on the cutting fucking edge of everything. Who else could I be talking about other than David Bowie? I mean, Hunky Dory. Am I right? It's so good. I can't even, the songwriting on this album. Side 1, Changes. That's side 1, track 1. Then Oh You Pretty Things, 8-line poem, Life on Mars, which I listened to on repeat the day that Bowie died, and I was just bawling listening to Life on Mars back to back to back. And I made all my students learn about David Bowie that day. And they were like, why? Who? His music's not even that good. And I was like, you shut your dirty mouth. Anyway, Kooks. Like, what a beautiful song, especially when you know what it's about. Yeah, and just so many good things on here, like Song for Bob Dylan and Queen Bitch, like, which is legitimately a good song. I just, Hunky Dory. And every time I think about the fact that we have to live in a world that doesn't have a David Bowie in it anymore, it makes me sad. But like we carry on and we listen to his music and it lifts us up. I'm just realizing how very disappointed many of you are going to be when I get to my number one record. So prepare yourself when I get to number one, because this is my number three. This record literally got me through the hard times. Like, there was a period in college where I would come home every day and just fall on my face on my futon, triple word score on the F's, and just cry. Uh, because life was kicking my ass. And this album, I would just put on side B especially and just have a good cry. Sometimes you just got to put on a good album and have a good cry. What do you need? Anyway, uh, music from Big Pink, the band. Cover art by Bob Dylan. It's terrible. Bob Dylan is not a good painter. I'm sorry. That has always been my opinion of Bob Dylan's paintings. Lyricist, hell yes. Musician, you betcha. Vocalist, it's an acquired taste. Um, Cover art, just take a picture of him walking. It'll be iconic. Anyway, regardless. But the band, if you don't listen to the band yet, you got to get you music from Big Pink and the band, self-titled The Band. Those two albums must own. You are required by law. I will, if you don't, I will find out, because they are not expensive. You can get them anywhere. It's like between $5 and $10 wherever you go, wherever you live. The band by the band is like, is you can get it for $7 somewhere right now. Like, and if you're really hard up, or if you don't have a record player, you can get it on CD for $1. Anyway, okay. This next one is one of the greatest record store finds of my entire life. Because I love this band so much. They are my number two favorite band of all time. And it's ridiculous because they only have two albums, except for the members of this band went on to produce and star in and create in their solo work and produce for other bands and engineer for other bands. Like, so much amazing, especially power pop, but not entirely power pop. You want to know what these guys did? Remember when Beck was starting to kind of suck and we didn't enjoy like Midnight Vultures very much? And then he put out Sea Change, and we were all like, holy shit. Thanks, Beck. That's amazing. Well, guess what? It is all due to the gentleman from this band, Jellyfish. Do you have any idea how hard it is to find one of these? It's darn near impossible, and they are very expensive. And I am a teacher, and I don't have a lot of money. But this is a promo copy. And it's not in the best shape. It's a little rough around the edges, but you can't find these anywhere. Like, they're so hard to find. I've been collecting for over 20 years. I have seen one copy of this in my entire life. And it's the one that's in my hand right now. And it cost me $40, and I could not give the money away fast enough. And it's worth much more than that now. So the record's in really good shape. The cover is admittedly rough on that one, but it is one of the greatest albums by one of the greatest bands, who also are now like some of the most sought after, some of the most incredible, bring everything to the table for your album, musicians, producers, engineers that you can get. And they've been in so many things. Like, your favorite band, your favorite album, they may have been on it. Like, the chances that they were is pretty high, because they get a lot of work. Because they're so amazing. Anyway, regardless, last album time. And with some people, this is going to be very controversial. And with some people, they're going to be like, hell yeah. Because I don't know how they've become so divisive. Well, no, I do know how they've become so divisive. I watched it happen, but I don't know why they chose to be. Anyway, regardless, back when all my friends listened to nothing but synth pop. Sorry, there's a little bit of schmutz, and I don't want you to see it with schmutz. It's just like a water spot on the outer cover, or not, on the plastic sleeve. Anyway, when I was in high school, I had not developed my own personal style, my own personal likes, my own personality, because like high school is a lot about finding out who you are. I mean, really. And these guys really, really helped me define who I am as a human being. I found them on my own, and I have been my life has been enriched by the fact that I have had this band's output in my collection in multiple formats, in as many formats as possible, as often as possible. And I have an agreement with my wife that when new stuff of theirs comes out, I get to buy it, even if our bank account is not doing fantastic. That has been in play since we were first married, when our bank account was a little more dire. Anyway, but yeah, I'm talking about boom, Weezer, the Blue Album. Now look, I know that I could choose Pinkerton and everybody would be like, well, you're right, Pinkerton is the superior Weezer album, and it invented an entire genre, and there was nothing like it at the time. And yes, I personally, my first concert that I ever went to in my entire life was the Weezer Pinkerton show, December 20th, 1996 at the Electric Ballroom in Tempe, Arizona, and I still have the ticket stub. But this album changed my life. And I'm sorry if they put out a weird 80s cover album, and if they gave in to the internet's pressure to cover Africa by Toto, and if they haven't made every career move that you love, and the Pacific Daydreams was such a like really forgettable album. Like, I'm trying to remember songs from that album from my all-time favorite band, whom I have seen live more than any other band, and I have seen a lot of live shows. But them more than anyone. And yeah, uh, look, I get it. If you hate them, because here's a funny story. Weezer related, and then we'll wrap this, and it'll only be 2.5 hours long. Um, if you stuck it out the entire time, I want you to tell me. Like, I'm not normally that, like, tell me in the comments and ring that bell, haha, do my channel shit for me. No, like, just, I am curious if anyone's still watching. Um, yeah, I might be increasingly under certain influences the farther I get in this video. Shh, don't tell the cops. Anyway, regardless. So yeah, Weezer, like they're my favorite band ever. And I've seen them live so many times. My children's first concert, they will always be able to say that they saw Weezer on the Everything Will Be Alright in the End tour, which wasn't that a great album? Yes, it was. You are correct. If you stuck it out with Weezer long enough, that is a slot machine that does pay out still. It's like Cheap Trick, okay? I've often said that Weezer is the Cheap Trick of this generation, in that, like, for their first, like, 20 years, everybody was like, oh my God, like, they appeal to everybody. Punkers, metalheads, alternative kids, skaters, hippies, fucking, like, everybody. They appealed to everybody, nerds, jocks, fucking, Cheap Trick style, appealed to everybody, right? And then Cheap Trick puts out The Doctor, which is a shit album. It is. It's really not great. Like, there's a B-side to one of the singles from The Doctor that is like 1,000 times better than anything else that's on The Doctor. And I think it's because it's like a outtake from an earlier album. Anyway, regardless, fact is, like, Pacific Daydream is Weezer's The Doctor. But, like, yeah, don't forget that Cheap Trick started putting out great albums in their, like, I don't know, 60th year of existing as a band. Like, how long has it been? They're like ZZ Top at this point. They've been around forever. Anyway, but let's not us take them for granted, because we kind of took ZZ Top for granted. That's true. That's all. So I'll pour some out. Pour some out. Anyway, ladies and gents, if you stuck with me all the way to the end, thank you very much. And if you're not too mad at me for having Weezer be the band that has influenced me the most in my life, sorry, like, but there's a shit ton of great music in my collection, and just pulling out these specific albums, do you ever look at your own collection and say, like, my God, I've got some good things in there, that it reminds you, like, I gotta listen more, not just own. I gotta, like, drop the needle on these mamma jammas. Anyway, well, ladies and gents, that is it. My top 10. Just kidding. 25. Because I couldn't limit it to 10. There's still things that I didn't put on there that I could have put on there. Um, yeah. Nick Lowe's Labor of Lust, Dave Edmunds, tracks on wax, rock piles. Now I'm just thinking of rock pile stuff. Richard Hell and the Voidoids, Blank Generation, like Wires, Pink Flag. God, there's so many albums I could put on there, but you know what? We'll get to them another day. I'll make other videos. Obviously, I tried to cram it all in this one. It's not going to work. We got to cut it down. Anyway, thank you for sticking it out. I will see you in the next one, friends. Thank you and goodbye.